the Nationals leader. David, thanks for joining us. Will there be a nuclear reactor in your electorate?
You're just going to have to wait a little bit longer. We'll announce that in the next little bit, but we'll be upfront and honest with the Australian people. And that's about making sure that on a technical basis that it does work in the geographical areas that we're saying that they'll go. But they will be where existing coal-fired power stations are. And the reason we want to do that is because there's existing infrastructure, there's existing workforces that can enjoy workforce beyond coal, but there's also the fact that we get rid of the 28,000 kilometres of transmission lines that will be required under this green folly of renewable energy that's destroying the very thing it's there to protect, the actual natural environment, while tearing up also prime agricultural land and your food security and driving up your food prices. So there is a sensible solution to this. We will announce it and we'll be able to show our costings as well about how much this will cost, what your energy bill will be and what your energy mix will be, about making sure we're not putting all our energy eggs in one basket. We're going to have concentration risk by going in an all renewables approach that can't even underpin manufacturing with batteries and wind factories and solar factories. They just can't do it. And so you need this thing called baseload power. And we'll make sure that we have that mix and Australians will see that, and we'll see a clear difference between us and this all renewables approach.
Well, just on that, the difference between the approaches, is the Coalition's election chances really incumbent on getting energy policy right? You've already set a clear difference, for example, in the issue of migration, but do you see nuclear as a make or break?
Well, I think it goes to the heart of the cost of living, and that's what Australians are feeling. And Australians need to ask themselves, after 2 years of Anthony Albanese, are they better off or worse off? And you look at what's driving inflation, discretionary spending stopped. We're not going to see Jerry Harvey to get a TV over a weekend anymore, but our fixed costs continue to be there. And it's our energy bills and it's our food bills, and they're intertwined because food costs more because of the cost of energy for food processors. But what you don't want to do is create sovereign risk and concentration risk by putting all your energy eggs in one basket. We acknowledge the Gen Cost report, but what that Gen Cost report failed to do last week as well, when we're going to talk about the cost of nuclear, it failed to acknowledge that a nuclear power plant goes for some 80 to 100 years. These wind turbines and solar panels are somewhere between 5 and 15. There'll be 4 to 5 times turnover of those, and you can't use the same concrete pylons for these wind turbines that you do for a nuclear power plant. And it also doesn't take into account the energy mix that we put in place, because CSIRO doesn't know what our energy mix that we'll announce, and that means that we'll have nuclear power plants running at greater capacity, 90% plus. That's how you drive the cost down. That's how the Canadians drove it down. And so that's what we'll articulate along with the sites to be upfront. And what you're going to get out of Peter Dutton and I is what you see is what you get. There'll be no sleight of hand. What we say we're going to do, we're going to execute it. We're going to make sure that we follow through. But I think what the Australian people want now is leadership, and you can't keep spending Australian taxpayers' money to solve the nation's problems, because ultimately it runs out. You've got to address the fundamentals, and that's cheaper energy, more reliable energy, but also attacking those things like food prices and migration and a bloated bureaucracy of 36,000 extra public servants here in Canberra. That's not going to keep the lights on, and that's the common sense that we'll be bringing to a new coalition government.
David, can I ask you this? There's been a suggestion by one Coalition MP that there could be financial incentives for people living in electorates where a nuclear reactor will be placed. Is that on the table?
Oh, look, we're looking at a whole range of different policies, but let me tell you, there are billions of dollars worth of incentives of having a nuclear power plant in your community. The jobs that will come from this, the high-paying jobs that'll be, in many cases, higher paid than what a current coal-fired power station is. But many of those expertise are transferable. So you've got to understand this will be a significant investment in these regional areas, and for those areas that have coal-fired power stations, Australians, as they slowly sweat out, what will happen is that there's an opportunity for some of those to switch over. And that's the common sense solution that takes away all this pain that regional Australians are feeling. Just say to everyone that lives in a city tonight, just please appreciate that if you want to go down this renewables approach and you want to reduce the emissions the way that this government is asking, just understand the burden you're asking regional Australians to bear. We're actually having our livelihoods ripped up in front of us because our prime agricultural land's taken away, not just with the turbines and panels, but with the transmission lines. We're tearing families apart, we're tearing communities apart, but for some reason we're meant to bear that brunt when there's an alternative solution that we can take time to get right, and we will get right, and we'll live up to our international commitments.
David, we're almost out of time, but I just want to ask you, we spoke earlier about the government's plan to criminalise hate speech. What's the Coalition's view? Is this really necessary?
Well, we've got to see what's in the detail. I'm reticent to support anything that Mark Dreyfus may bring to the Parliament without seeing the detail. There are already laws in place, criminal laws in place, and I think the government's got to articulate why they haven't been used, why they aren't satisfactory, and if they're not, then we'll be constructive. But we need to understand the detail and that there aren't any unintended consequences. But what could solve a lot of this is leadership. The Prime Minister standing up and showing strength of leadership to the Jewish community in this country, that we are not going to tolerate those sorts of comments that we have seen history show a slow and arduous and horrific march towards the horrific death of a race of people. This is something that we need to stamp out in this country, and political leaders, including myself, need to stand up and call out those that want to do that, but also religious leaders that don't stand up and support the Jewish community and say this is abhorrent and we're not going to accept it.
David Littleproud, thank you for your time tonight. We appreciate it.